com. Let's go to the Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Kendall Rogers joins us right now from D1 Baseball. You can follow them on Twitter and, of course, d1baseball.com to read all of the content that is available there. Kendall, we were talking just a second ago before the segment began, and you think this baseball season, not just in the state of Mississippi, we'll get to the state of Mississippi in a second, but across the entire country, I think your word was bonkers. Is that right?
Yeah, it's going to be bonkers. I mean, I really think it's going to be very similar to basketball in the sense that you've got the portal, you've got more guys moving around than usual. Remember, you still have the COVID kids, as I call them. You still have some of these teams like Texas State, whatnot, that are like ultra old. I just think it's going to be just a total crapshoot come postseason time. And, it was just a year ago that when the last 5 teams in won the national championship. So I guess, we're kind of used to total pandemonium. But I just think when you look across the country I saw the stat the other day from one of our stat people at 643 Charts is, like 28% of the games so far this year have been blowouts, which is 8 runs or more. That is up from like 22% last year. You've got home runs up almost 900 year over year. When you have those two stats present, that just creates a lot of volatility across the country, and I think you're going to continue to see that.
Heard people say that the ball's a little bit different this year. It feels like every time home run numbers are up, people say that the ball's a little bit different. Some of it is because of a tighter strike zone and guys are having to throw more strikes. What do you attribute the considerable uptick in home runs to?
Well, I'm going to give the least controversial answer first. I do think weather plays a part. I mean, I think if you look across the country right now, I think we would all admit that it's been a little bit warmer than usual in most places. If you look in the northern part of the country, like Michigan was actually able to play a home game a couple of weeks ago. You're seeing, Iowa's been able to play home games earlier than usual. I know being here in Texas, one of the LSU games was cold, but against A&M. But other than that, it's been pretty warm down here. So I think that is a factor. I do think there are 2 other things at play. I think number one, I think that there's no doubt in my mind the ball is juiced. I still go back to the home run. I think it was like 3 weeks ago, maybe, a home run that Calvin Harris hit. And again, I'm not like accusing him of doing anything iffy here, but like the guy like barely touched the ball at the bat, and like it just kept going and going and going, and actually ended up going like 2 levels up in the outfield at Ole Miss. And like you watch the swing over and over, and like he didn't hit the ball hard. Like I've seen like probably 40 of those already this year. I remember over the weekend I was watching Blake Burke from Tennessee. He had like a 478-foot bomb against A&M. And like I would have to look, but I bet you there's been 25 home runs hit this year that have been like 450 to 500. Like that's not normal. And so I think the ball is juiced. I think there's an element too. I think that teams have maybe figured out how to kind of toe the line on the bats and things like that. So I think there are a multitude of factors, but I think the least controversially, I do think it has been warmer. That has helped. Has it been warm enough to warrant 900 more home runs? Absolutely not.
But does everybody have the stickers on the bat in the proper place?
It's a great question. To ask Mike Bianco about that one.
I don't know. Maybe I'll ask.
I think going back to last year, real quick, I think going back to last year, like so many people accused Tennessee of tampering. Maybe Tennessee was just ahead of the curve and everybody else is now caught up.
Maybe so. Kendall Rogers, Tennessee apologist, well known on your radio.
I know, noted. Last week you got me in trouble with all Twitter. Can you tweet at them this week and call me an apologist just to kind of get them off my back?
Yeah, I'll do that. Kendall joining us on the Farm Bureau guest line. If I don't want to put these words in your mouth, but something to the effect of maybe Mississippi State was catching Vanderbilt at the right time.
Sorry guys.
Upon further review.
Oh man.
So let's talk Bulldogs baseball for a second.
Let's talk Bulldogs, okay? So Hey Dad's not on here, so he won't pass out when I say this, but he's on the. So I'm just going to give you 2. Like my analysis on Health State does not need to go further than this, guys. If you look at Mississippi State right now as a Southeastern Conference team, you are ranked 209th in the country in ERA, and you are ranked 225th in the country in fielding. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I don't care if you've got nine, Hunter Renfrows in your lineup. You are not winning very many SEC games, well into the 200s ERA wise, and well into the 200s from a fielding percentage standpoint. It's kind of interesting. We're over here also, pressing the panic button to a lesser degree on Ole Miss. But, Ole Miss is sitting at 19 overall in fielding. They're actually 136 in ERA. So all these Ole Miss fans that think like their pitching staff's garbage, I mean, they're almost 100 points higher right now in ERA than Mississippi State. That just gives you an idea how bad Mississippi State's been.
Hey, Dad, do you want to ask the question that Mississippi State fans always love to ask Kendall, or should we just skip that?
No, I think we're good to skip that question this year.
I really think you. Go ahead. No, I just think this weekend again. This series this weekend for them is really like it. Like, I mean, I just think if you get in that big of a hole in this league, like you're just not coming out of it. And frankly, I would love for them to put that on the bulletin board. I'd love for them to use that as a rallying cry. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I don't think this team has shown me over the last month or so that they have what it takes to turn this season around. And until I see that, I'm not going to believe in it.
Well, but to take that a step farther, so if they don't get it done this weekend, almost impossible to dig out of the hole. But look at who's coming in this weekend. It's South Carolina who leads the team, the country in home runs against a pitching staff that you documented the struggles just a moment ago.
Yeah, it's not a great matchup for them. And I guess the one thing about it is you just, maybe this is the weekend they finally catch somebody at the right time. It looks like South Carolina is going to tinker with Will Sanders a little bit. They may move him to the bullpen from the weekend rotation. So in a weekend that they may tinker with things a little bit, maybe you'll kind of surprise some people. But I just think, I kind of thought it last week, and they got outscored 44-8 in 3 games. But this is yet another weekend that for me is a gut check time. Like, last week was a gut check time. This is like that times 10. Like, if you go into this weekend and you play lifeless after just honestly just getting embarrassed in front of your home fans, like, you might as well just lock the locker room door and just go home for the rest of the year. Because if you can't rally after that kind of beating, like, when can you rally, right?
All right, so in another series that has got some pretty high stakes this weekend, Ole Miss goes to College Station to take on Texas A&M. You're talking about 2 Omaha teams from a year ago. Ole Miss at 0-6 in the league, Texas A&M at 1-5 in the league. I mean, calling a weekend series do or die or make or break when you've got 80% of your conference games left is maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but we're getting really close with both of these teams, aren't we?
Well, we are. I mean, I think at this point, I do feel way better about these 2 teams than somebody like MSU. I do think when you look at Ole Miss, we've talked about over the last month or so, they will eventually get Hunter Elliott back. That's going to be a game changer down the stretch. So I just think if you're Ole Miss, you can kind of get a series on the road this weekend. I think you're starting to feel a little bit better about yourself. And yeah, they haven't knocked the cover off the ball in conference play, but we've seen these guys hit before. I have zero doubt they're going to hit. They need to pitch better. But, again, things will change when Hunter Elliott's back. I think for A&M, I kind of go back to last week, and I thought last week when we talked that series for Tennessee was bigger at home. I think this series this weekend is a little bit bigger for A&M. I think, if you're A&M and you don't take care of business in two of 3 series to start conference play at home, you're in trouble. And so, and I'm kind of in the same boat with A&M as I am Ole Miss. I think A&M is one of those teams too that I think they will get better as the season progresses, but they're kind of to the point now, especially when you look at their overall goal is to get to Omaha and to host and things like that. Like, you're starting to get to the point where if you struggle this weekend, getting to a record where you can host is going to be difficult for both teams.
Hey, you got time to hang on for one more today?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we'll continue to talk with Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball. When we come back, I'm going to ask you about something, and maybe this is even counterintuitive. I was talking with Scott Strickland, the head baseball coach at Georgia, a week or so ago, and asked him about the state of the league, and he said It's the best that it's ever been. And he said, I feel like I've been saying that for each of the last 5 years. We'll ask Kendall about the overall SEC. When you think about South Carolina undefeated, LSU as elite as any team we've seen in college baseball in a really long time, Missouri better. Looks like Tennessee's going to be okay. Arkansas, they got one against LSU last weekend. What's Ole Miss going to do? What's Texas A&M going to do? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that when we come back. Sports Talk Mississippi, visiting with Kendall Rogers on Ole Miss and Mississippi State individually. Let's kind of widen our focus a little bit to the entire league. LSU, this LSU team, they've lost a couple of games in the league, but they are scary 1 through 9 in the order, or at least 1 through 7 in the order. Paul Skeens on the front end of that rotation. I mean, I don't know if you were surprised that Arkansas won that game. It was the Friday game score was misleading for how that game actually went on Friday, where Arkansas gets the win. Have you seen anybody like Paul Skeens? I mean, I know Schloss a couple of weeks ago compared him to Strasburg. I think Dave Van Horn said he's the best college pitcher that he's ever seen. What do you compare him to?
I think Strasburg's a great cop. Because Strasburg, back then, he looked like a big leaguer. Like the stuff was excellent. The body was tall, and he looked like a 30-year-old man. And I feel like Skeens the same way. Like when he's on the mound, he looks like he's. It's kind of a strange way to put it, but like he looks like he's more of a man than like the rest of the guys on the field. And the thing about I kind of go back to this one at bat that Skeens had against an All-American Austin Bose of A&M a couple weeks ago when I was in College Station. And I mean, it was 102 outside corner with run to the glove side on the fastball. It was 101 with glove side run on his fastball, and then exact same spot he pops in a sweepy 85-mile-an-hour slider. And, like, I'm not even kidding you. Like, Bose literally looked at all 3 pitches and just shook his head. And, like, you just don't see many pitchers in college baseball to where they're so good that the hitter, like a guy that's a well-accomplished All-American hitter, is just like, dude, I can't hit that. And, even Arkansas last week, like, when they got hits, you could tell they were just totally guessing. Like, that's pretty much all you could do against that guys is go up there and guess and hope you guess right. With that said, I will say this about LSU. As much as I like their offense, as much as I like Paul Skeens, they still have some work to do. I'm still not sold on Ty Floyd in the weekend rotation. I'm obviously still not sold on Thatcher Hurd. And we all know, just ask Arkansas in that super regional against NC State, all it takes is one bad game or 2 bad games, even with a good offense, and all of a sudden you're sitting at home. Ask Tennessee last year. So LSU's not a finished product, but they're really good.
Brandon Finnegan, TCU, left-handed pitcher, 2015. Pitches in the College World Series. Gets drafted. Gets called up. Gets to the big leagues. And is on the World Series roster for the Kansas City Royals that same season. Could Paul Skeens get drafted after this season and end up in the big leagues before the year's over?
Well, his workload may keep him from doing that, but could he go there, compete, and actually do well? Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. I mean, to me, he's by far and away the best pitcher in college baseball. And I would argue that you could take the top 5 or 6 arms in college baseball, prospect-wise, throw them in the big leagues, and I think most of those guys would have success.
Wow. All right, so what about – I feel like Florida is kind of going about their business quietly right now. It's a really solid rotation with Sproat and Waldrop and then Caglione. Jack Caglione is elite defensively. He is leading the country in home runs at this point. There are a lot of good pieces. They're good defensively in the outfield, just okay defensively on the infield. Is this Florida team a vintage Florida team, kind of rewinding 5 or 6 years to when they were mainstays in Omaha?
I think so. They might even be better. I mean, I think when you look at Florida overall, I think they're really balanced offensively. They can beat you with power. They can beat you a variety of ways. And there's more depth to this lineup than even the national championship team. Because I mean, if you look back at that team, you had guys like Mike Zunino, Nolan Fontana, and guys like that. But like, the bottom of the lineup was not, it was not a lineup that you went, oh man, this is really scary. I do feel like this lineup, top to bottom, is pretty scary. I think they certainly have enough on the mound. They've got enough, out of the bullpen. I do think this is a national championship caliber club, and it's kind of funny. It's funny that you mentioned they're under the radar, because I'll just go ahead and say this. I was talking to Sully back, I don't know, mid-February, and he made a joke, and I know Sully well. I know he didn't mean anything, ill intent by it, but he said, "Hey, keep talking about LSU, but you'll be talking about Florida in a couple of months." And like he's right. Like Florida's a really, really good team. You could argue they're just as good as LSU or Wake Forest without a doubt.
All right, so a couple of teams that people I don't think expected a ton from coming into the year based on what they've done in recent seasons. Missouri has 10 wins in the league a year ago. They've looked pretty good. They get the sweep of Tennessee. They get swept on the road this weekend. But that seems like a better ball club. And then you got South Carolina sitting there at 6-0 on top of the East.
Yeah, Missouri is a solid club. I liked them opening weekend at Globe Life, but I was wondering if they had staying power. I think if they don't have two starting pitchers come out with injuries early in the games against South Carolina, I think they win that series. I mean, they almost won that series without those two guys. And so the good news for Missouri is it sounds like Chandler Murphy, their Friday starter, will be back. Sounds like he had a bicep cramp or something like that. And
well,
he's
that's
probably
good news because it looked bad when he
back.
came out of the game. Kendall, his reaction, and you thought, well, he's done.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of what I thought. But it sounds like they told me that it's nothing to be too worried about. Ian Losey, they still have tests pending on him, and it sounds like they're cautiously optimistic that he will be back in a couple of weeks. So I think if you have those two guys back, and then you throw in Roy Maltred and guys like that, Austin Schlosser and Zach Franklin, I still think you have enough pieces to have a good year and get to a regional. So they're certainly much better. I think South Carolina, for me, the thing I like about South Carolina is a lot of the games that they lost last year, they're winning this year. They're winning these close games in the ninth inning. They're getting big hits from Ethan Petrie and guys like that when they need them. Will Sanders really hasn't been an All-American type of pitcher like he can be, and they still got, 23 wins. So I have no doubt that he's going to figure things out, and once he does, that's going to make them even more dangerous.
Kendall, the Kentucky Wildcats are pretty good. They're the number one RPI team in the country at this point. They're 21-3 overall. They've played the 8th most difficult schedule. Is Kentucky for real?
That's another one for me that like I'm kind of looking at seeing if they have staying power. We joked earlier about getting teams the right time. I think they actually are getting teams the right time. Like they got Mississippi State when State was obviously very iffy. They got Alabama on the road after Alabama had a tough series loss to Florida. When everybody else in Tuscaloosa was thinking about the NCAA tournament. So they're catching teams at the right time, but give them a lot of credit. They've been really balanced top to bottom offensively. They're doing enough on the mound. And a little bit like South Carolina, they're getting it done with a lot of transfers. A lot of people looked at A&M last year and went, hey, A&M went from, a team that didn't make the postseason to a Final Four team in 1 year. Why? Because they went out and got older, experienced guys from other programs. Both UK and South Carolina have kind of followed the same formula. And so maybe it's not too shocking that both those teams are having a lot of success.